Hello everybody, Stevie again. Welcome to my video on sport coaching, steps to success. My first video I just introduced you to some of the scope of the book which I published recently, Sport Coaching, Steps to Success, and I gave you some feedback in regards to what I was going to talk about in the following videos. So in the second video I want to talk about coaching philosophy. Sport coaching philosophy is very important, especially if you're a high profile coach or you're coaching at a certain level in professional sport, but also matters in sports that are not professional as well. So I want to give you some insight to what's going to happen in this video. Now, first of all, I want to discuss the importance of knowing thyself. Very famous biblical scripture called Know Thyself, and that is a very important first step in your coaching duties, is to know thyself, because if you don't know yourself and what your strengths and weaknesses are, it's highly likely you're going to have problems down the track. So I want to talk a bit about knowing thyself and how you can do that, and I also I want to talk about the need to have a coaching philosophy. In my own past experience, working with coaches and being coaches of certain coaching jobs myself, I've often been confused by coaches and not knowing which direction to take and what is it they're actually thinking. And I think it's very important to understand that coaching philosophy is very, very important if you want to become effective. So I'll go into that a little bit more depth. And I also want to discuss the importance of having coaching objectives, because if you haven't got any aims and objectives, then you can have problems in regards to ineffectiveness in your coaching duties. But I also want to touch base on coaching style. In a sense, coaches are leaders in their own way. They have leader traits. They want to take on a particular coaching position for a reason, but they also need to adopt a certain style, and that style needs to fit the coaching program or the coaching participants or athletes, to make sure you get the most beneficial response from your participants. But I also want to close the video off with a bit of insight from three coaches I mentioned in the first video. The research I looked at was Phil Jackson, the NBL basketball coach in America and a highly successful coach in his field. Rick Charlesworth, also the Ollie Roos gold medal coach, and also Alex Ferguson, the EPL Premier Football League coach in the UK. So I want to bring some insight to what their philosophy is and what they had as an aim and objective when they took on their coaching role. So I think you'll find that section a little bit very important and interesting for yourself. Okay, so let me just ask you a quick question. And if you're a coach at the moment, whatever, you might coach junior development, youth development, you might coach amateur sports, you might be a single coach to a specific athlete, you might be a semi-professional or professional coach. How are you going about at the moment with your coaching tasks? Or if you're going to take on a role or you're aspiring to a coaching role, how do you intend to approach your coaching tasks? And that's a very important question to start with, because if you don't know what aim and objective or approach you're going to take, you can obviously often come up against a brick wall, and players and athletes and young teenagers can turn off very quickly if they feel there's some problem with your style or the way you coach or your philosophy of coaching. So it's important to know how you're going to approach your coaching in the first place. So let me ask you another question. What is your coaching philosophy? Now, some people might not even know what the word philosophy means, but basically it means coaching philosophy. means the way you think. How is your thinking going to affect your coaching role, and how is your thinking going to affect others who you're coaching? So you need to know what your coaching philosophy is. It's the first step in becoming very effective as a sports coach, is to know your own self and to know your philosophy. Now, what I mean by that, the way you think, you'll have certain beliefs, you'll have certain values, and you'll have certain principles that you want to follow. And they might have been attained during a life of experience. They can also come from other coaches you've been privy to, or worked under, or played under, or participated under. These values, beliefs and principles often get passed on, and you might have liked something the coach has done before, you might have liked the way he approaches the coaching task, you might have been very successful under that coach, and you might have also noticed that they have certain principles in their coaching style. So what I just want to give you a quote here, because I think it's really quite interesting to pass this quote on, and it's based on your beliefs and your principles and your values. And what it basically means is that the way you think dictates the way you coach. And you have to have this philosophy of thinking, because if you don't, you could be very confused easily. You may go off track, you might not be very respected by others. So it's important to understand that the way you think dictates the way you coach. So if you're a winning coach, you like to win, as an example, you're not going to do very well in a junior or youth development type coaching role, because it's not about winning. So your philosophy of thinking is out of sync with what's expected to pursue that particular coaching role, because predominantly it's about developing talent, not about winning. So hopefully you can see the point there. Now, Phil Jackson, the NBL basketball coach who I've mentioned a couple of times in the first video, was highly successful in his sport and highly respected by his athletes. Michael Jordan was one of his athletes, so you could see the quality of the athlete where he was under his regime. Now his philosophy was based on 3 core principles, and they were communication, open communication, respect, and the final principle was the principle of trust. And what of his philosophy, the way he thought, was that he needed to build up the trust in his athletes, because he knew that if he didn't have trust, then his athletes would often turn away or not respond or not be as effective as they should be. And that part of his success was based on those 3 core principles, with trust being a main driver. How you get that trust, there's various strategies to be able to do that, and I'll bring them up as you go through the video series. Well, an interesting point about Phil Jackson, which I really quite enjoyed reading, was the fact that not many people may know this, but he had Indian memorabilia, Northern Indian, American Indians. He had memorabilia all over a dressing room, and that was part of the ritual before any particular tournament or game, was to stay in a quiet moment and just look at the memorabilia. And also he got all his athletes to meditate for 4 or 5 minutes, just to declutter their mind, to de-stress, and to get rid of the anxiety that might be building up, and relax players. And basically to calm the mind, because the more the mind's calm, the more creative and the more instinctive people can become. So know thyself first, know who you are, know what your coaching objectives are going to be, and know why you need to think the way you need to think when you're coaching a specific type of sport or a certain level. And does that level of thinking fit what's expected from the sport or the team or the athletes? So why do you need a coaching philosophy? What's the reasons we need a coaching philosophy? It might sound very technical at first. Lots of people don't even know what a coaching philosophy is. And I'm sure you have your own experience of coaches in your own sport that you love and you've got a passion for, where you may think that this coach really doesn't have any direction or control of what he's actually doing or she's doing. So the reason you need a coaching philosophy is to remove potential confusion. People need to know what your philosophy is so they can also follow you, and you need followers in sport. Coaches are about leading, and you need followers to follow you, but that trust has to be built up. And if there's potential confusion, the trust can be hard to find or hard to gather. Coaching philosophy also removes ambiguity. People then know what you're about, they know what your aims and objectives are, and they know what you're trying to achieve. It also removes uncertainty, and that sometimes can be very apparent in coaching roles, where players or athletes are not sure what they're supposed to do, not sure what they're supposed to follow and how they're supposed to react or behave, and that is a problem. So when you've got a coaching philosophy, you also present great clarity, and you can also present the clarity to your athletes or your participants. It also gives you an opportunity to have ground rules and portray a certain conduct, what's expected. So the philosophy is, I'm expecting you to do this and expecting you to behave like this. Well, let me add pop a question to you, because I think I spoke in the first video about my experience with Bill Shankly, the Liverpool coach, who was very, very successful, and what I thought about him. And his philosophy was fairly simple. He wanted to build not a club, not a team, but a club and a brand, and that was his philosophy. As the way he thought was he wanted to build a huge, strong brand and dominate European football. That was his main aim and objective. So he was very clear on what he wanted to do, and wouldn't argue against the fact that he did that. But what is it you have admired in a coach? If you follow a certain sport team or you follow a certain sport, someone always tends to stick out. What is it that you've admired in a specific sports coach? Because you might not think this, but you do subconsciously pick things up by watching and observing coaches as well. And what is it that you like about these coaches that you think stick out in your mind? Okay, so when you think about that, you start to also learn that they have certain traits, and they're very strong-willed. They might be have good people skills, good communicators, but they have a vision. They have a strong philosophy on where they want to be. The way they think is very key important ingredient as well. So if you want to become an effective sport coach, you've also got to consider how much you disclose to your athletes, what they call self-disclosure. So winning coaches I've worked under and played under got very close to the players and the athletes, but some coaches went so far, and that was about the line that you could go to, because you can be too personal and too interpersonal, and then lose the ability to lead or manage the participants as well. So you have to look at how far do you want to go with your self-disclosure, your real self. Do you need to tell people about yourself, your real self? We all have a persona that's a false self, and many times in coaching, this false self, or this ego is what I call it, surfaces because you have to put a barrier in place to prevent yourself being hurt emotionally, or give yourself some strength when there's conflict arising. So it's how far you go, how far you disclose your real self, and how far you talk to people, and how far them conversations go. Some people keep their professional sport coaching ideologies in the sport, and no one knows what happens outside of the sport. So, but some coaches are quite happy to discuss what they do in their family life and their social life. So you've got to work out yourself what your philosophy is before you start coaching, so you don't get yourself into too many problems down the track, because in my opinion you can get too close to your athletes. Okay, so I like to present a quote here from a sport psychologist who's very well known around the world, from a respect point of view. in his field. And Dr. Rainer Martins had an interesting quote where he says, "It's important to develop a coaching philosophy to clarify your coaching objectives and determine your coaching style." So that's a very nice little statement there. The philosophy is to provide clarity on your coaching objectives and determine your coaching style. So you need to set objectives, and your participants and your coaching people around you need to know what your objectives are, and also they need to know what particular style you're going to take. Okay, so that can also vary, because in different levels of sport you might have to adjust. If you're a winning coach, there's no point in trying to develop youngsters, because young youth development or junior development is not about winning, it's about development. And I've seen many coaches coach young teams of juniors and teenagers with the strong emphasis about winning every game, which in reality, by the time these youngsters get to 15, 16, they're either burnt out or they move out, because they're not enjoying what they're supposed to be doing. It's all about winning, and that comes from the philosophy of the coach. That philosophy of winning at all costs can be very damaging depending on the type of sport and the level of sport you coach at. So it's important to know your philosophy, know your objectives, but also be in the right fit for what your thinking is and what your intentions are, and if does it fit with the sport or the level you're in. Because there's three general reasons for coaching, and they don't sway away from them reasons. And that three reasons are to win. So if you're a winning coach, you need to find a team that's going to have the same philosophy about winning, and also the same infrastructure, or the sport management teams have got the same fit in regards to their philosophy. The other second one is to help young people develop. Is that your aim? Is that your philosophy? Is that your objective, is to just help people pass on your experience? And maybe you might be a player one day, and you might want to pass on your skills and your knowledge to the youngsters to help them develop as well. And you might just be a coach that just wants to help people have fun, because I've met some great coaches who just got that same philosophy. They're not interested in the politics, they're not interested in winning, they're not interested in pressuring youngsters or old people, they just want to have fun. And that social interaction is the main goal for them participating in the sport. So that philosophy of having fun is a very important one, because it also comes to professional sport as well. So it interlinks sometimes. Now, three types of coaching styles. You need to be very careful in regards to your coaching styles. There's a command style, a submissive style, and a cooperative style. Command style means that you're the coach and you make all the decisions. Depending on the level of sport, I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson, you could probably say he was a command style coach. He made all the decisions, but he obviously also was a cooperative as well, because he had a cooperative style, because he had a team of coaches, a team of scouts, a team of advisors and consultants and sports science people. So he was also a submissive, a cooperative style coach. So he involved others in decision making. But the final command style was his style, because he made the final decisions. But then you might have a submissive style where you've got a free spirit, you just allow things to happen, there's no ego involved, there's minimal decision making, and you just work in the moment. Interestingly enough, like Phil Jackson with his meditation prior to the basketball games was also part of that reason to make people become part of the moment and not get too tangled up in what's going to happen and what if this happens. He brought people back to the moment by calming their mind. And that was an interesting tactic which I think could be very powerful to coaches. So what does the philosophy of Rick Charlesworth, the Olyroos Olympic team in hockey, what was his philosophy? Well, Rick Charlesworth talks about the importance of being prepared, playing as a team, and ensure high quality training. So his philosophy was built around those three core principles: preparation, playing as a team, and having high quality training. But also to portray honesty. He was a very open and honest person. If he felt that someone was not towing the line, he would tell them in his own way and privately. And he portrayed honesty about how he felt about certain things to his sport participants. He praised and encouraged people often. That was one of his philosophies. He no matter if they weren't pulling the weight or they weren't playing too well, he was always praising and encouraging them. And he mentions the importance of restraint, which I think is an interesting point, because restraint, emotional intelligence in a sports coach is very important, because there's many a time where there's conflict, emotional distress, emotional build-up, tension, anxiety, whatever you want to call it, and coaches sometimes lose it because they get tangled up in the moment and they say things they're not really wanting to say, but it's just the occasion that brings it out. And he mentions restraint being very important as a coach, and I think that's very important to pass on, because if you can self-regulate your emotions and be strong and courageous and not say things at the wrong time, then you can become very effective in your role. Excuse me. Now, Professor Elbers, who worked in the Harvard business case study in America, actually chose Alex Ferguson to do a 360-degree study, which meant she scoured lots of coaches in the UK and assistants that he worked on with, the coaching staff behind the scenes, interviewed people, observed certain coaching games, how he coached in certain games, and she came up with a study for students in the Harvard Business School in the USA. And she found that the guiding beliefs, values and principles from Sir Alex Ferguson were a little bit different to Rick Charlesworth, because he had a strong emphasis on building youth. He's seen the early vision of the strength of the club was based on its youth players, and he had this vision of harnessing the youth and getting the best youth players around and building their skills and their knowledge and their technical abilities. And she talks about Alex Ferguson making a statement which was, I want to give them technical skills, and I want to make them winners, and I want to make them better people so that they can go anywhere in life. So when you look at Alex Ferguson's approach and his philosophy, it wasn't just about winning games. It was about building an entity, building a brand, and building the brand through the development of youth players. And I think no one could argue the fact that he had probably the best youth players in the world at one point. So you could see his philosophy was quite different to Rick Charlesworth's, and that was also a point I wanted to point out there. His principles were completely different. So Alex Ferguson was also a strategic thinker, so he used to think ahead before things happened, so he could plan and accommodate things in advance. And he also was known as a portfolio manager of talent. So he wasn't just about winning games, he was a portfolio manager of talent, and that was one of his philosophies. Get the best youth players and make sure we can build them into quality players, but also have quality beliefs and values themselves. Okay, so what is the critical importance for having a philosophy? Well, the critical importance of having a philosophy is that you know yourself, you know your objectives of your coaching role, you know your values and your beliefs and your principles and how you're going to portray them to your participants. And that's something that you really need to consider very seriously. But you also need to know the reasons for your coaching. Why are you actually coaching? Because that can become a problem if you've got the wrong reasons for coaching, especially if you're in the wrong role and you've got the wrong objectives with a certain level of sport participants. If you're a winning coach, there's no way you should be developing young players, because they need a certain philosophy and then a certain objective and certain principles to be adopted to make them develop in their own accord. So lots of people put winning as a philosophy, but it's not winning that's important. And I want to just conclude is that you need to understand your purpose, understand the reasons why you're coaching, and understand your philosophy of why you're coaching. The way you think is very important. Let me close on a quote from Dr. Martens, because Dr. Martens seems to hit the nail on the head. He says, athletes first, winning second. So it's not the other way around. It's not about winning. It's not about athletes becoming second. Athletes first, winning second. He also says that you need to have an athlete-centered coaching philosophy. So whatever your philosophy is, it needs to be built around the athletes, not about the objective of winning at all costs. Okay, so I hope you got something from that coaching philosophy video, and I'm very excited to be moving through with these videos, especially from the big coaching, sport coaching, steps to success. And to get successful, it's not always about winning. Success can be lots of other things, like Alex Ferguson said, develop character, developing values in youngsters, and that's also success. So know yourself first, know your philosophy, know your objectives for coaching, and the purpose for your coaching, and you should go a long way. So I look forward to meeting you on the second video, and tune in. If you want to know more, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, so you're always in touch with the videos I do, and hopefully it's a learning experience for you today, and happy coaching out there. Thank you.